All right, so we're going to get started. We're waiting on a few more folks, but we are recording this webinar, so we'll send out the link afterwards. If people have to join late or have to leave early, you'll still be able to catch the whole thing. But thank you so much for being here. Really excited about this particular topic. We've been seeing so much great public art over the past few months around town, and we really want to continue to support that. So that's why we're doing this webinar at this time. We've got some grant funds available for business districts, which I'll be talking about later for mural projects. But just want to let everybody know to make sure you're muted. If you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat, and we will save time at the end to get to everybody's questions. My name is Jacob Falkenberg. I am Communications and Member Services Director at Venture Portland. For those of you that don't know, Venture Portland is a nonprofit that supports Portland's 50 neighborhood business districts. So we offer training, technical assistance, and grant funding for projects like public art, which is why we're having this conversation today. Just want to go over a couple of ground rules. Like I said, please remain muted and ask questions in the chat. We want to just expect the best from everyone. Everyone listens and participates. We want to avoid interruptions and triggering language. If there is a problem, attack the problem, not the person. And we recognize the value in having diverse perspectives. So thank you all for being here. Also want to introduce our speakers and thank them for taking time out of their busy day today. First is Salvador Mayor from the Regional Arts and Culture Council. Salvador, thanks for being here. And Tomas Valadares from the Portland Street Art Alliance. Yeah, okay, great, sorry. So thank you both for being here. I'm sure you have a wealth of knowledge, and I'm really been a fan of the projects that you've been working on lately. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and kind of let us fill you in on what you've been working on. So Salvador, if you want to kick us off, tell us about your role at RAC and what's been going on over there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jacob. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Salvador Mayoran. I work at the Regional Arts and Cultural Council. Pronouns are he and him. I've been in the organization for about 5.5 years, and my role is in public art. I do a number of things there, including project management and also managing the murals program, which is why I'm here. Actually, just quickly, how many are familiar with the Regional Arts and Culture Council? If you could just raise your hand for those that have their screen on. Okay, yeah, there's a few, great. So the Regional Arts and Culture Council is a private nonprofit. Actually, it used to be part of city and county government. And about 25 years ago, it left city and county to become the Regional Arts and Culture Council, private nonprofit that actually contracted right back with the city and county to handle the arts investments. And so what we do is a number of things, including we offer a variety of grants. We also do a number of things around public art, which is what I work in. We have arts education programming, and we also have a robust communications, and with it, over the years, we've had a number of community engagement initiatives. Particularly around public art, the program has been around for about 30 to 35 years. We have primarily how we get our funding is through the Percent for Art ordinance. Also raise of hands, does anyone know what that means? Percent for Art? Yeah, okay, this is where it gets a little quieter. Percent for Art basically is the mechanism in which we receive funds primarily to do artwork in the public realm. About 2% of capital construction projects go to actually artwork. And our program does a number of things. That means that we can do permanent artwork outside in the public realm. We can do interior permanent artwork. Right now, the Portland building just finished a renovation. There's a lot of artwork in there that has been generated due to that percent for our ordinance that we manage. The same thing with the new central courthouse, which will be, I believe, opening up here in the fall. Things like that will generate stuff like that. In addition, we also do temporary installations. We do artist residencies, and then the murals program, which is what I manage. It's been an interesting time. I'm sure everyone knows and how they're working in their world. I would say the overall organization has been really trying to respond to the artists and arts organization community. Since April, we released emergency relief fund. As I don't know, as many of you know, just in being sort of entrepreneurs, artists are also entrepreneurs, and they oftentimes are working from contract to contract, gig to gig. When the pandemic hit, a lot were affected and still are. And so we've been looking for ways in which we're able to offer some sort of relief. Right now, we are handling monies through the CARES Act, and there are a number of resources on our website for that, in which we're also trying to allocate some of this funds again to artists and arts organizations. So it's been an interesting time how we're sort of moving through that space. I would say some of the projects that we've been doing for the last few months in particular around murals, there's a program called Fresh Paint, which is a collaboration between Open Signal, what used to be Portland Community Media, and also RAC. And on the wall of Open Signal that faces MLK, we have been giving it it's been acting as a temporary rotating mural project aimed at emerging artists of color. And so right now we have our 6th artist to be working on that, which we're really excited. Her name is LeMay May, and yeah. And then also we've launched an initiative called Under the Deck, which is at the intersection of Southeast Madison and 2nd in Central East Side, where artists are painting the bridge columns underneath the Hawthorne Bridge. That is something that's actually been in the works for a while. It's a partnership between Prosper Portland, RAC, the county, and the local artist community in which this initiative actually sprung forth. So we're keeping ourselves busy with trying to get artists out working and doing stuff in the public realm. And yeah, trying to also take care of them too.
That's wonderful to hear, all the great things that you've been up to. So thank you for sharing with that. And got lots of questions for you about the mural process. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But I wanted to kick it over to Tomas to tell us a little bit about what the Street Art Alliance has been working on and your role over there. Hi, Tomas.
Hello, I'm Tomas Valladares. I am one of the founding directors of the Portland Street Art Alliance. Tiffany Conklin, who's in the audience here, is our executive director and the other founding member. So I might just shout at her to chime in if she feels comfortable doing it. But I'm going to share my screen here so that I can share a little bit about the organization. Can you all see that? Great. So we are a nonprofit, 501c3. We were founded in 2012, primarily as an advocacy network, a network of artists, of academics, of professionals, trying to promote street art culture here in Portland. We incorporated as a nonprofit in 2016 and have been growing ever since. We primarily started as an advocacy group, kind of trying to be a voice for the artist community, to help be a bridge for artists that were working in the street, in the public space, to connect them with the city on trying to change policies towards around street art and mural making, connecting to business communities, businesses, and it's really grown ever since. We now have a network of over 200 local and regional artists that we work with on a regular basis. So we have this roster of artists that that we work with and represent whenever possible. The way that we work is sort of through three main program avenues. One is doing commissions. So we work with property owners, business owners on commissioning artists. So if someone has a wall that they want a mural on and they say, you know what, they reach out to us, say, we're looking for specific content or whatever it is, and we will pare down our roster to meet their criteria. And so we'll maybe present five or so artists that meet what they're looking for. They can select, and then we handle that whole process for the artists. So we do contracting, invoicing, etc., so that the artist just needs to show up and paint. We'll handle all the communications with the client, but also for the client side, they know that everything's handled, that there's a professionalism, and the artist can show up and paint, and we handle everything else. These are a couple of quick examples of some of the interior murals that we've done. And then, a large part of what we do is education. So it's, some of it is part of these conversations that we do is educating the community around street art history and what it takes to do a mural. Also, education for artists on what they need to do and sort of professional development. But before COVID, we were doing street art tours through Airbnb's experience platform, and really successful. Part of it is a painting tutorial, so you get to practice your hand at using aerosol spray paint, but then also doing a tour of the Central East Side Industrial District, which is sort of where the biggest concentration of murals happens to be. And then the other piece that we do is community projects. And this is typically, this is done either through grant funding or through donations from property owners who might have a property that they don't maybe have the funds to support a proper commission. And so they'll reach out to us and say, hey, we have this property, we'll donate to the program. And what that allows is that PSAA has free reign to to select the artist, to curate the artist, that the artists have artistic freedom to paint what they want. But we're able to manage that project, give opportunities to artists, and help out the property owner in this way and the community in this way. Here's a couple of examples of some of the successful ones that we've completed around town. This is sort of a before shot of the Coast Auto building, and this was the after. And one of the things that we do here is we work really closely with the graffiti community as well, and we try to showcase the art that is inherent in graffiti style text. And often there's a lot of misconceptions about what graffiti is, and so we try to showcase the artistry that goes into what graffiti style text is, and there's a long history there, and aerosol art in general. And so that is some of what we do, and that allows us to also work on work that are often dealing with chronic tagging. And so we have found that, like this Coast Auto Supply, this was chronically tagged. We worked with people that have a long history in doing graffiti style text, which is then maybe a little bit more respected by the tagging community. And then we can transition that space into a space for art and not just tagging. And it's been really successful, which we can talk a little bit more about as we continue today. I'm talking so much about what we do. This is Viaduct Arts, so we are currently working with the Central East Side Industrial Council to create a mural district in the Central East Side. And we're really excited about that. And this year we were able to kickstart that project with funding from the Oregon Community Foundation for this Viaduct project. And what that was focusing underneath the bridges, underneath the Morrison and Hawthorne Bridge, to do sort of concentrated corridors of art down under there. So hopefully that seeds the idea of this mural district. And we, along with what RAC's doing with the columns under there, we're really trying to spearhead a really concentrated mural district as the district develops. We think it's a really exciting thing for Portland to have a space where people can come and know that they're going to see art up on the walls in a really accessible way. I think that's a big part of what we talk about is the accessibility of street art and murals. You don't have to pay an admission to a museum. You don't have to go through, different, barriers, where you're able to just experience it and see it on the street. And so Viaduct Arts, we were able to support some emerging artists in increasing the scale of their work, in giving folks opportunities to paint murals for the first time, or maybe the second time, and grow their portfolios. Also really focused on providing opportunities to artists of color throughout Portland and outside of Portland proper. And so these are a few of those examples. Yeah, thanks. I think that's a little bit about what Portland Street Art Alliance is.
Thanks, Tomas. Some really beautiful projects there, so congratulations on all that, and hope to see more from you in the future. For the purpose of today's conversation, I think we're going to be focusing on exterior murals, specifically in business districts, so on the exterior walls of businesses, both in the central city and the surrounding neighborhoods. That's kind of the spirit of the projects that we fund here. So I guess my first question for you all is, what does the process look like? What type of permits do you need, and how long does it take, and what's the first step?
I was like, Tomas, should I do it? So there are actually two ways in which you can get a sanctioned mural in the city of Portland. The first way is, I would say, is the city of Portland's $50 mural permit. Basically, you fill out an application, you pay $50, you send in elevations of the wall area that you're going to paint on, and then you have a community meeting at the site. And Tomas and Tiffany, I don't know if they've changed that to online now for that since COVID, but yeah. It's a real, it's in some ways, I think it's an efficient system because the city doesn't look at the design of the mural. And they've actually opened up sort of the type of infrastructure that you can have reviewed by that process. So before, it used to be, well, what it is now, I should say, is that it can be both a wall or a structure that doesn't have a roof. So for example, retaining walls are now something that they review. Um, uh, that's one way. The other way is our through our process, and it's different in the sense that you don't have to pay a fee to apply, but we do look at the design of the artwork. We have a murals committee that reviews the applications, um, and then we also have the property owner sign an art easement. And basically, what that is that it's a legal agreement between the property owner and the city doing two things. One is that it allows the artwork to be accessioned to the city's mural collection, but it also holds the property owner responsible for the maintenance of the mural. And within that, there are various there's language in there that allows the property owners to have that modified. So if that's something that they would not like to be responsible for and they rather work with the artists, or let's say it's being organized by an organization, for example, like PSAA, there is amendments that can be done to the art easement for that. Plus, it also has a number of clauses in there that is also flexible should the property need to be sold, or it's going to be renovated, or just that it doesn't make sense anymore to have the mural and the property owner wants to then, no longer have the art easement. There is language that allows for that flexibility for it to be terminated. So we try to not make it an obstacle or barrier for property owners to, to when they sign up for it to have a mural. Yeah.
I think it's important to note that currently in Portland, you're required to go through one of these two processes to have a mural. Otherwise, it can be considered graffiti or unpermitted murals, and they could ask you to remove it or fine you potentially. I don't think the city's doing that currently, really, right now. But and part of the reason for these processes that were put in place were to deter from sign making and signage. And I think there was a question around signage. And so, I think the city wanted to make sure that they could control how much signage was in the public space. And in order to do that, there was a lawsuit, but they put this process in place in order to make sure that signage was not going through mural making, right? So that advertisers were not painting a hand-painted sign and leaving up a hand-painted billboard. And so that's the reason why those things are in place. And so the city permit does require that the mural is up for 2 years and does not change for 2 years. And there are some other kind of restrictions on size and height, but primarily, yes, and that shouldn't include signage.
Right.
So, yeah, you mentioned signage, or a business's logo probably won't get the approval from the committee. Is there anything else that if someone has an idea for a design, they should keep in mind before they start the process that could hinder their application, either in the design or the specific wall that they're choosing? Sometimes walls have, windows or awnings or other things that might, it might not just be a blank wall. Is there anything that they should know about picking not only a piece that they want to do, but a space they want to do it on?
That's a good question. I think in regards to signage and sort of like a business logo, I think something small. There's oftentimes like maybe a like sponsored by kind of thing that's very small, but if it's a prominent piece of the mural, there has been at least one case that I know of that there was a mural that was painted over. to take out the name of the business. There was a bicycle business, that bike mural, and they got rid of the text on there because that was could be considered a sign. So that's important to think about. Something for us as an organization that we are always promoting is, sort of free expression, but also, engaging artists to do their work, that, and having art for art's sake. I think that you certainly could incorporate, there's a lot of businesses want to incorporate, elements of their business in a mural. And so we always try to find a balance, that's not just like basically a direct advertisement of your bicycle business on the side, but maybe it's incorporating bicycles into the design, and leaving the freedom to the artist to creatively incorporate your considerations. I think that's something to keep in mind. Not to say that an artist wouldn't be interested in painting something that was really directly related to your business, but that's something we always encourage.
I would also say that it's when we're looking at walls, first of all, the wall has to be visible in the public right away, right? So something that has that kind of visibility, meaning that things on campuses or in, we're talking about exterior spaces, but like interior or sort of, closed off, that's not something that neither the city nor RAC would review. I would also think about the condition of the wall too that you're looking at. And also what's the material? I mean, we look at a number of walls that have different substrates like concrete, brick, or even wood, but keeping in mind what is the condition of that to get it to a place where artists can be able to use it as a canvas. And then what would the continued maintenance on that look like? And so, and I just even thinking about that too, like, graffiti has become such a thing in the last, I would say 10 years. And so maybe it's putting an anti-graffiti coating on it. Maybe it is working out some kind of agreement between the artists and you as the property owner of the business, right? To ensure that if something if something happens to it, what does it look like for someone to come and take care of it? Especially if it's something that, if the graffiti or the tag is pretty large and sort of changes the integrity of the artwork. And I say that too, then also for property owners and businesses to be thinking about what's their investment then in the project. I think at least for RAC's process, when we're looking at an application, one of the things that makes it competitive is us seeing what else are the property owners doing besides simply letting an artist have that wall. How are they investing in it? And so what does that look like to maybe either put cash donations or doing in-kind donations for the project? So our property owners, for example, if they're not putting a cash donation, are they covering the anti-graffiti coating then? Are they helping the artists with the materials and supplies? If it's something that's high, are they helping with the cost of the equipment rental? Like those are the things also I think property owners and businesses should be aware of when they are looking at potentially having a mural at their property.
Right. I think both what RAC is doing and us as an organization is advocating for artists, and artists are professionals and have a long, history and experience of painting murals. And this is, we're promoting artists doing this work to sustain themselves and so we always promote a living wage, and making sure that property owners and business owners understand the costs that go into this, just as much as you would pay to a company to paint your building, even just a solid color, to think about how much you are going to invest in a piece of artwork that that's going to also better the community and sort of lift up those voices as well. But so thinking about making sure that that everyone understands the cost of what really goes into this, because oftentimes, I think folks think, oh, well, I've got this space and an artist would love the opportunity to paint here. And that might be the case. There are a lot of artists that like the opportunity to paint and will paint for little to no money, but that also goes to sort of like, what is the quality of what you're looking for? We do encourage investment in these murals, and that's something where a Venture Portland grant could help to supplement an investment into one of these murals. So we're happy to see that this is a new program that's developing.
I just want to add too, for folks, if they don't know, generally the rule out there is about $25 per square foot. That's basically what you can use as a way to create a budget. And that would include the artist's time and their labor and potentially materials. But if there's other things like, for example, the anti-graffiti coating, or you're going to use scaffolding or lifts, or even if there's a community engagement, exercise or activity part of that, that would be additional to that $25 an hour or $25 a square foot. And the other thing I forgot to mention too is that RAC, between the city and our process, we're the only funders as well. So we do primarily permitting and funding, and we offer up to $5,000 per application.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the cost, because I think a lot of people don't understand what goes into it. Not only, paying the artists a fair wage, but also the cost of materials. So that's a great rule of thumb for people to kind of start with, to see if it fits within their budget, and then having some other resources to help maybe offset some of those costs. Are there any opportunities for discounted materials around? Do you partner with any maybe paint manufacturers or anyone else around town that you work with that could maybe offer lower rates on some of the materials?
I think it's always great to ask. I think us as a nonprofit, we've been able to get discounts from Miller Paint and some other businesses that support and sell products for artists. So I think it's always good to ask. I'm not sure of just of a blanket discounted materials for folks painting murals. Metro Paint is always a good cheaper option. They have a limited color palette, but it's really great, at least for big solid colors where you might be painting the background of a mural, or if it's a very graphic and big blocky style. Metro Paint's a great resource.
Do the artists typically handle the purchasing of the materials, or does the permit holder handle that and then coordinate with the artist? What's the best way to go about that?
In our experience, it is the artist. Sometimes, like, if we're working on a project that's a specific project that we're managing, we might step in and handle some of that piece. But typically, yes, right, as Salvador said, $25 a square foot should cover labor and materials at least. And so artists should be well versed in the materials that they need and what they're able to go and purchase. Sometimes when it maybe requires a lift or some kind of equipment rental, maybe an artist could work out some kind of arrangement with a business owner or a property owner. But typically, I think if you're reaching out to an artist to do a project like this and do a mural on your building, the artist handles most all of those pieces. So really, it's really just about applying for the permit. And the artist or the business can apply for the permit. So I think you can also work that out amongst that relationship. I think if you're talking about potentially this the Venture Portland grant opportunity, then it might be the business association that's applying so that you can match those funds or whatnot. But I think typically you would expect that an artist would handle most of the logistics.
That's great to know. And on the topic of artists, we've got so many talented people in town and in the metro area. Any suggestions on how to choose an artist, or are there any resources available for potential applicants to maybe see a roster of artists to find a style that they like?
Yeah, well, RAC has a muralist roster that we've been adding and maintaining for the last few years. So you can go there and take a look. Obviously, groups like Portland Street Art Alliance. There's also Forest for the Trees, For the Love. I mean, there are local muralist groups that are working with a number of artists locally and also sometimes nationally or internationally to bring artists into Portland. So those are also great, I think, resources too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think RAC has a great public roster that you're able to peruse. It's by no means extensive. Like it is an extensive list, but it's not every artist, and you don't need to select from that roster in order to get a RAC grant or go through their permitting process, through that application process. One thing I always say is, go around town, look for murals that you like. Oftentimes these days, most muralists will put some kind of signature at the bottom of the mural. Most of the time it is an Instagram handle. So you'll see like at so-and-so. And so that's usually the best way of like discovering. Instagram is where every artist is on and sharing their work. And so, searching hashtags of Portland street art or, PDX murals or something like that, I think is a really, a great way to discover artists. And then of course, working with a group like ours, if that's within your budget, we always are happy to help, with that process. I would suggest every time that we work on a project, we ask for a design board, some kind of visual inspiration, references, because that's really helpful in you have that conversation, think, okay, what are the styles that I like, what artists out there do I like, even if it's not within Portland, but it's a really great way to narrow down what you're looking for and for artists to respond to and to say, like, oh yeah, I totally get that. And it's, it's a great way to say like, okay, it looks like you're looking for something really graphic or something really abstract and painterly. And, having those visual references sometimes is a little easier than trying to explain it in words, especially for a lot of us who are not artists.
Yes, definitely can understand how that could be difficult. So I wanted to talk a little bit about something that Salvador had touched on a little bit ago. Salvador, you mentioned that RAC will fund up to $5,000 for specific projects. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like? What types of projects are eligible for funding, and what types of things does RAC look for potential grantees of these projects?
Yeah. Well, we fund a number of things that are on private property. Well, I should say not residential property, but rather like businesses or the buildings that have maybe 5 or more residential units within it. So something a little larger. We also look at stuff that doesn't necessarily, again, have like a roof structure, so retaining walls. We recently permitted and funded a muralist to do something on a boxcar last year. We also look at properties that are either owned by the city or county, as well as properties that are either historic building or in historic districts. So it sort of runs a gamut of what, at least for the RAC process, we can view. In terms of just like how you would apply, there's a couple of components to it. The first one is an application. And I believe there's a link that Dane put into the chat. The application it's an online application, has a narrative. So you would in it talk about sort of the context of the project, how it came to be, what does the mural design look like, what maybe the conceptual information around that, and if there's any kind of community support, either local businesses or local I should say neighbors that have visibility to the mural, their support. This would also include like neighborhood associations, business associations, and then we also ask for a budget too. So what is the overall expenses of the project? And of course, as I said earlier, like what are any in-kind donations or cash donations also that are coming to the project? We look at the design of the mural, and so we definitely want to see that. And then we also ask for letters of support. And again, this is around either the property owner, specifically their support around signing the art easement. But if there's any other businesses or neighbors that are, again, have visibility to the mural, getting their support and their buy-in, which is pretty key.
Yeah. And again, to give the other side for the city permit, there is no design review. The city cannot dictate, what is painted, for freedom of speech. So if you go that route, there are some restrictions. Can't be on historic property, et cetera, and that's also the part of the reason why RAC's process is set up too, is to supplement where the city is not able to permit. But it is still the same, must be a 5 or more residential property, so no like individual homes or townhomes. And yeah, it's a $50 permit, 21-day process, basically, where you have three weeks where you have to put up a board that says there's a mural coming here. You have your community meeting. The community meeting is a part of the city process that is not a binding, process, but it is a way to just let the community know that, hey, this is happening. Again, since there's no sort of review of the design, the city's just sort of stamping that it is a permittable structure and that it's not a sign. But that's open, but at least you're letting the community know that there's something coming into their neighborhood, and to be, they can ask questions and participate in some way.
Now, Tomas, you had mentioned that the Street Art Alliance also works on projects where, a property owner just wants to give the artists free reign to do whatever they want, and maybe there's some flexibility there as far as some of the costs being covered as well. Can you talk a little bit about that? If, they don't have a particular design that they want to do, they just maybe are having problems with graffiti and they want to have something up on the wall and maybe work with some graffiti artists as a deterrent for some tagging and stuff.
Right. That's our community art program, and it it has come about, often from properties that are kind of neglected properties. The property owner is not really doing a lot of upkeep, and it becomes an issue for the neighborhood and for the community. And maybe it's the other businesses around that are saying, hey, we're keeping up our properties. This property is kind of getting neglected. And we'd like to see something happen here and to see it get cleaned up. And oftentimes, if a property like that is being kind of neglected and there's a big tagging problem and they're not able to do the upkeep, we will step in and have offered this program. And so typically it's a donation. So whatever, the property owner is able to come up with, and we will usually, again, work with them to say, like, here's what this would typically cost, whatever you're able to provide. And then we can kind of work within that to see, like, is it the whole building? Is it just one part of the wall? And how many artists can we support in doing that? And yeah, like we said, a lot of, the selection of a design has to do with the site. I think this goes for a proper commission or this sort of like free reign community art project. We do a lot of thinking about that, about the site. If it's a property that's constantly getting tagged, typically if you do sort of a fine art style mural there, it might not get respected from the tagging community. That this is a community that, sort of, I'm not really sure how to explain it, right? But it's folks that feel an ownership of that space and are going to keep tagging that space if they don't respect the art or the artist. And so, we typically try to figure out ways for those chronically tagged spaces, a way to transition it into more fine art style mural making. And typically what that looks like is engaging with artists that work in a graffiti style. So graffiti style text, definitely aerosol, and that typically, right, if there's a tagger that comes by and they recognize the name that's on there, then they're going to leave it alone. And so, I showed an image of the Coast Auto Supply. That was a great example where the property owner, there was a developer that bought the building. They were going to develop it in a few years. That's another piece of our community project, is typically it's properties that are maybe going to be developed. And so they're not going to be around for 2 or 3 years or 5 years where like a traditional mural makes sense. And so, it's something that's going to be developed in 6 months or a year. Maybe a community art project is a great way to get some art up on there to sort of deter some of that tagging, and to provide something nice for the community in that process where that building is vacant or standing there waiting to be developed. And so Coast Auto Supply was an example of that chronically tagged property. I mean, from top to bottom was tagged all the time, constantly getting changed out. And developer bought the property. They said, hey, we'd love to do a mural here. We'd love to like clean this up. And, we knew immediately if you do a mural on this building, it is going to get tagged so quickly. And so what we said was, let's engage some graffiti style writers and artists to paint something here, and they kind of pushed back and said, well, we really want some more sort of fine art style painting on this wall. And so we tried an experiment, which was to combine the two, and with actually pretty great success, because oftentimes artists that are working in graffiti style and doing text-based work do work as fine artists as well. And so they have a variety of skill and styles that they can do. And so with that one, they wanted to do something that had a nod to the history of the neighborhood, which was Produce Row, which was used to be, and that property used to be a fruit and vegetable warehouse and distributor. And so we worked with the artist and the property owner to come up with this theme of fruits and vegetables. And so they created, 30-foot tall melon and bananas and fruits and vegetables across the whole building. But then within that, the artists were able to do graffiti style text using the same color palette of the fruit or the vegetable. And so it was a nod to the graffiti community and to that style, but also merged the two. And we think it was a pretty successful project. It hasn't been tagged once in the almost 2 years that it's been up, and been respected. And we think, the neighborhood has really appreciated it as well. So that's something to think about: is your property being tagged? Then maybe going with an artist that does something that's like a landscape painting might not be the right approach there. And so we definitely always work with artists, like if it's not being tagged and you don't feel like it's going to be an issue, absolutely, we encourage all styles of expression in murals, but it is important to think about the site and sort of the history of the site when selecting an artist and a design.
But it sounds like the fact that it's technically a temporary installation, that's okay as far as Street Art Alliance is concerned. It's still a valid project. Whereas Salvador, I don't know if does RAC fund temporary installations or mobile installations? I know there's been a lot of temporary installations done on the boarded up windows of businesses that have had to close due to COVID. Have either of you had any experience with projects like that?
I'm glad that I know I was looking at that question in the chat. So, yeah, so actually, interestingly, because it's right now on the boarded windows, because those are temporary, they don't need to go through any kind of permitting or process. So RAC is not looking at that, and neither is the city. And that's been really interesting, because what we're really witnessing right now, and I think it's a really interesting and beautiful moment, is we're looking at pure expression from community that's happening. Because there's no hoops to go through, there's no permits to, paperwork to fill out or things to pay. Artists are really taking advantage of expressing themselves, on behalf of the community. And one of the things that I think is really notable right now is the fact that many of the artists that are painting on the boarded windows a lot of them are not artists who've ever painted outside, period. These are artists that are really experimenting and trying their hand at something new, at large scale work. So I think this has been a really wonderful exercise to see folks, I think, for themselves. Can I do this? Do I like doing this? Do I want to do this again? And they're gaining experience by painting on these boarded windows. One of the things that we're doing, RAC, is that we're trying to capture a lot of the artists that are working right now and include them in our muralist roster, which will be updated here very soon. But a lot of the work that's happening is being facilitated by different groups. I'll let Tomas speak to that because I know they've been doing that work. But there's also a group in Old Town Chinatown that's been organizing and spearheading a number of those murals in their neighborhood. And I think they're called Old Town Chinatown Mural Project. And that's, these efforts are just coming from the community members themselves. They're reaching out to various groups, or they're starting it themselves. Foster's got a number of projects happening out there. It's just really, it's a beautiful, pure expression, I think, right now, of what we're seeing out in the public realm.
Yeah, I really second that sentiment. You know, I think we're seeing so many artists come out, you know, artists that we had never even known. There were artists that have worked in small scale, and it is a low stakes way to experiment and you know, experiment with scaling up and doing a real mural, right? You know, a 4x8 piece of plywood is not so scary as like a 15-foot wall. And so we're seeing a lot of artists that, yeah, had been working on canvas or in other forms and wanting to get into more public art and mural making, and then seeing that happen right now, which is really amazing. And so many artists are coming out of the woodwork, and you know, a lot more diversity in the artists, you know, that we're seeing all these different voices that are coming out, and that, you know, might not have been connected to the street art or mural making scene before. So the temporary thing is pretty great. And yes, for a temporary structure like that, there's no way to get a permit. So it's sort of in a weird gray area. I think there was a question about mobile installations. That might be, I think you end up getting into like right of way questions and things like that. But yeah, you know, those temporary projects are pretty great, and we've certainly been supporting some of those.
Yeah. And I would say for folks, if they, you know, if it's something that they have questions on or they're curious, whether it's a mobile installation or something else, feel free just to reach out to us. That's another thing, and we'll definitely engage in dialogue around it. So
Yeah, if you're comfortable, we'll share your email address with all the attendees after this, because unfortunately we've reached the end of our time, and it sounds like there's still some unanswered questions or people that want to continue the conversation. So we'll get some more information out to you via email. So look for that. I just want to give a quick plug for our Venture Portland grants are actually due September 25th at noon. So if you are part of a business district that wants to do a mural, I'll send you some information along about that, and I'm also available to answer questions about that. So, but I want to thank our panelists, Salvador and Tomas. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days to speak with us, and hopefully we can work together in the near future.
thank you all.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and yeah, feel free to reach out, please.
Thanks. I'm happy to stay on for a couple more minutes if to answer some of these questions if folks like. I know that, you know, there were some questions in the chat that didn't get answered, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that if anyone else is you know, has any burning questions.
Sure, yeah, we can sit on for a few more minutes. If people have to leave, don't worry about it. Like I said, we'll send you a video recording either later today or tomorrow. So thank you everybody that came, but if you want to stick around, yeah, we'll go ahead and see if people have a couple more questions. So let's take a look at the chat.
Great.
So let's see, it looks like
There was a question about a residential building being developed, and that, yes, there it does have to go through the same permitting processes, even if it's a brand new building that's, you know, being developed. So I would say, please do go through those processes.
Yeah.
great. Okay. I think there was also a question about artists. Is it okay to work with artists that aren't local? So if a business wants to has someone in mind that's, you know, outside of the state, or you know,
Yeah.
does that make any difference as far as your programs are concerned, or permitting or anything?
as Tomas mentioned, we have these rosters available, but by no means is that you have to pick an artist from there in order to apply to any, either through our process or the city's process. So yeah, there are national and international artists that come through this area all the time, and that is fine.
Yeah.
Glad to hear.
As far as building owner having obtained a permit and given notice to the community, can the community oppose to the art? If you're going through the city's permit, I mean, the community can oppose the art, but you're not required to change the art, again, because it's freedom of speech and the city cannot control that. And so, of course, work with your neighbors, and, if your neighbors are upset about something you're putting up in your neighborhood, you might want to address it to be a good neighbor. But there's no like legal way that the community can stop that from happening. So.
Let them know. Let them know that you're doing this and that a project's coming, and share the design with them too. Like, it's just, yeah, as a courtesy. And the city's process, I think, is a little different in that sense, where at least for RAC, we do want letters of support. So an applicant should already be in dialogue with their neighbors that a mural is coming, because we are looking to see proof of that the conversations happen, but also that there's investment from them around the project. So yeah, just let them know.
Well, I did notice that on a mural down the street, the business did put up a piece of paper outside of their business that said a mural's been being planned. If you need more information, contact this. Is that a common thing that you'll have to do? Is put something like that up for a specific period of time so people can get more information if they need to?
It is required from the city's permit process. You need to put a public notice that there is a mural coming.
Yeah, not from RAC.
Provide 3 weeks of time that's up so that people can come to your community meeting. You give them enough time to see it.
Great, good to know. So that will help kind of keep everybody in the neighborhood informed of what's going on. Question from Tiffany. Explain how these are being funded. So specifically talking about the panels on the boarded up windows of businesses that have had to close. I know that there's a group down on Southeast Foster that I think had a part in creating these, but also now that the businesses are reopening, have been auctioning them off as a fundraiser for the Portland Mercado, which had a couple of break-ins a couple of weeks ago. So any thoughts on that? Are these mostly self-funded projects that the businesses and people from the community are doing, or how are these projects kind of coming together? And is there any guidelines for what to do with the art afterwards?
Yeah, I think typically what we're seeing is that they are really either self-funded, or the business wants to support in some way. But businesses that are boarded up, especially during the pandemic, they're hurting too. So we've seen that with a lot of the boarded up buildings, that there's not a lot of funding for that. So a lot of artists are doing that because they want to give back to their community, and they want an opportunity to use their voice and give back. Yeah, put some art up in their neighborhood. So we're seeing that those are really there's not a lot of funding for those happening right now. I think we were working on a project where the neighborhood, there was a neighborhood coalition that put some money towards funding. It was in the Pearl, so we there was a small $3,000 towards putting murals up on those boarded up businesses throughout that district. So I think you're seeing it kind of across the board, and what happens with them afterwards is a really good question. And I know that Salvador's working on that, and I think it's such a important part of in our like history in general, but in our public art history of the messaging and things that are coming out on a lot of these boards, and so it's important to preserve them in some way. But in the end, right, the building owner is probably the one who owns the board. So
yeah. I mean, I think I've had conversations with some property owners around this, and I mean, one idea is ask the artist if they want it. The other thing is that I know there's a number of property owners, especially in the downtown area, that are having a conversation about archiving the boards. And so what does that look like? I think the Oregon Historical Society has been brought into that, and potentially are they going to be archiving some of that work? Or is it documenting it? So hiring like professional photographers to capture this moment, and that, at least it lives on digitally. And if it needs to be, scaled up again in some way as, a reminder or part of an exhibit or what have you, that exists. There's lots of conversations right now, and I don't think anyone has really a good idea yet, partially because I think we're still in it. We're not done yet, so.
And I think the last question we had for you was if an artist is interested on getting on one of these rosters, how do they do that?
Yeah, I mean, for the rack roster, we have a process. And so I would say go onto the website, the process is outlined there, but you also can respond to myself, and, I can answer that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we for PSAA, we always encourage artists to reach out and send some of their work examples, and we'll put folks on the roster if it makes sense. And again, typically that the way we work with our roster is paring it down specifically for specific projects. So if someone's style works with what someone's looking for, then it works out.
And Jake, if it's okay, I also want to respond to the question just around appropriation and appreciation. And I appreciate that. One of the things that we've been looking at is sort of what we're calling like, community authenticity, especially around imagery. And so for just to use that example, as a white person appreciating Native designs and representation, if that property owner is going to have that kind of imagery, being really mindful of like, who's doing the imagery, and how is that also responsive to the site? Does it make sense? Because I think that kind of stuff will then really get into determining whether it's tokenism or performative, support. Just being really mindful of like, who are the artists you're working with? What is the imagery that you're really trying to get out? And yeah, how authentic does this make sense for the site, and also for either the business or even the community it's supposed to be for? I just would ask a lot of questions before in making those kind of decisions.
Right. We recently worked with a property owner that was interested in a Native American designs, and so we worked to find artists that are of that community and that work within those styles, and to make sure that the designs were coming from a real place, and rooted in the history.
I'm sorry.
I
think Tiffany had something to say. Tiffany, I think you're muted there. Oh, you're good? Okay. And thank you both for speaking to that. That's really important, as businesses are thinking about, what types of imagery they're going to be working with. So, definitely a conversation that we can continue to have. Great. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I want to thank you both again for being here, and we'll send out some resources. So let's continue the conversation via email. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks,
you.
Al.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see more murals in the city.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Keep up the good work.